My name is Chris. In that tense instant, barely had the lawyer begun to speak when my sister Lydia fired off the words that cut through the air. She won't receive anything. Dad hated her. The coldness of that sentence echoed through the room the moment my feet crossed the threshold. No greeting, no eye contact, just that sharp accusation, spoken loudly enough for everyone to hear, as if she wanted it to reverberate. I felt the impact of the words in my chest, like a punch. I squeezed my son Thomas's hand tighter, his small fingers curling around mine, warm and trembling. I forced a smile for him, thin and hesitant, but he always knew. I hadn't even sat down, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome, I wasn't family. I was just a loose end they were there to cut off for good. Lydia was at the head of the table, impeccably dressed in a gray pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in that tight bun she always wore when she wanted to feel superior. Her lipstick was a stark red, Lydia's classic war paint for a battle I didn't even know I had entered. Then came the voice I dreaded most, that of my Uncle Oliver, my father's older brother. He let out a dry laugh and leaned back in his chair, his fingers laced behind his head, that smug smile spreading like oil across his face. "Even her son knows she's worthless," Oliver muttered, nodding towards Thomas as if he wasn't even human. Thomas lowered his eyes to the floor, and my heart clenched even tighter. Around the room, some heads nodded in agreement. My cousins, former neighbors, family friends I hadn't seen in years, people who had long ago chosen a side, and I wasn't on theirs. I swallowed hard, my throat feeling rough as sandpaper. The air was thick with the smell of dust, leather chairs, and the excessively sweet perfume Lydia seemed to have bathed in. I felt my pulse throbbing in my ears, loud, hot, humiliating. I guided Thomas to the farthest chair, at the end of the long mahogany table, away from the group. The chair creaked when I sat down. Thomas climbed up beside me, his legs dangling above the floor, his hands folded in his lap as if trying to disappear. Lydia slowly turned her head towards me, and when our eyes met, she smiled, but there was no warmth there, only pity bathed in poison. "You know this is pointless, don't you?" my sister Lydia said, her voice soft and cold. "Dad rewrote the will, cut you out completely. Said you were dead to him." I didn't answer, I couldn't. My tongue felt heavy and useless in my mouth. I just nodded slightly, as if I understood, but inside I wondered why I had even come. I thought maybe there would be something, a note, a line, a sign that he remembered me, something that would make it all make sense. Instead, I was back in the one place I vowed never to return to, surrounded by people who had made it clear they had buried me long before they buried him. And just as I was about to get up to leave, before they started dividing the inheritance like vultures, the door creaked open and Mr. Carlos, my father's lawyer, entered the room, holding a thick briefcase under his arm. He looked exactly the same, impeccably dressed, with tired eyes and a face that revealed nothing. The room fell silent. Everyone straightened up a little. This was it. I braced myself for the humiliation. I came expecting nothing and would leave with exactly that, or so I thought. Because what no one in that room knew, not Lydia, not Oliver, not even me, was that my son Thomas had brought something with him, and with a single sentence, he would unravel everything they thought they knew. "You forgot about the video he recorded." It had been 9 years since I had stepped into a room like that with my family. 9 years since I had pieced together a life they said I didn't deserve, took Thomas, just a year old at the time, and left without looking back. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. Because every conversation with my father, Marcus, ended in silence or shouting. Because every family gathering felt like walking barefoot on broken glass while smiling for the camera. But now I was back in a room that still smelled of cigar smoke and old anger. The irony was that I didn't even know I had been invited to the reading of the will. The envelope arrived 3 days after the funeral, with no note, just the date, time, and address in Carlos's formal handwriting. For a moment, I wondered if it was a mistake. Maybe they meant to send it to Noah. Or maybe it was just a final cruel joke. But Thomas wanted to go. He looked at me with those big, soft eyes, his voice calm but firm. "We should go, Mom," he said. "Maybe there's something you need to hear." I don't know how a 10-year-old can carry so much wisdom, but he does. Sometimes, I think he sees the world in ways most adults never learn. So we came. I wore the simple black dress I hadn't touched since my mother's funeral, and he wore a small button-down shirt he had chosen himself. I braided his hair that morning with trembling hands, and he told me I looked beautiful. He didn't know I had barely slept, that I was terrified of facing the people who had treated me like a ghost for nearly a decade. I knew what they thought of me. Lydia, the perfect daughter. She stayed. She helped. She took care of Dad. She made sure everyone saw her doing it too. She told the story so many times it became absolute truth. Chris abandoned the family. Chris couldn't handle real life. Chris ran away. They never asked why I left. They didn't know or didn't care. That father stopped talking to me after I refused to stay in a marriage that was destroying me. When I showed up on his doorstep with Thomas and a suitcase, he closed the door without a word. That one person who was supposed to protect me from the world had become another wall I needed to break down. Uncle Oliver didn't help. He was my father's echo, always repeating the same bitter phrases. Family doesn't give up. Blood is loyalty. Don't come crawling back. And Lydia absorbed it all and turned it into a script she could use as a weapon. So I stopped trying. I built a quiet life for Thomas and me. We didn't have much, but we had peace, love, and laughter. Still, part of me clung to the smallest, most fragile hope that maybe, in the end, my father had seen something, regretted something, left something behind. Maybe that's why I opened the envelope, why I showed up there. But now, sitting in that room, surrounded by hard stares and smug smiles, I felt foolish for having hoped. Thomas hadn't said a word since we sat down. He sat up straight, his hands in his lap, his eyes scanning the room as if he were studying each face. His calmness made me a little nervous, as if he were waiting for something. Then Mr. Carlos cleared his throat and opened the briefcase. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to myself, "Just get through this. Don't let them see you break." But Thomas was sitting on something bigger than the pain, and before it was all over, he would prove to be the only one in the room who had truly heard my father. Mr. Carlos cleared his throat again, in that way lawyers do when they want the room's attention without actually asking for it. He adjusted his glasses, opened the briefcase, and began to read the will as if it were any other Tuesday. I barely heard the first few lines: generic legal jargon, definitions of assets, executor declarations. My mind was racing, not with what he was saying, but with what I knew was coming. He wouldn't say my name, I was sure of it. Still, every time he paused to turn a page, I held my breath as if maybe, just maybe, the next words would be different. Maybe he would surprise me. But no, it was the usual suspects. To my daughter Lydia, I leave the main residence and all its contents. Lydia's face didn't move, but I could feel her satisfaction like a perfume hanging over the table. She glanced sideways at her husband, Justin, who gave her a small, smug nod, as if they were already planning renovations. To my brother Oliver, the lakeside property and all remaining shares in the family business. Oliver leaned back further in his chair, arms crossed, chin up, like a king surveying his newly acquired kingdom. I watched him slide his cigar back between his teeth and gently nibble on it, as if he had already won something. Something for Mike, my nephew, the collection of vintage cars. Mike, the cousin who once locked me out of my own room at 9 just to watch me cry. That Mike. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop my face from breaking. I felt the tears welling up behind my eyes, hot and sharp, but I didn't let them fall. Still no mention of me, not even a footnote. Then came the sentence I dreaded, and as previously stated, my daughter Chris will not receive any part of this inheritance. There. Simple, final, like a door slamming shut. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. Thomas's fingers slipped into mine under the table. I hadn't even realized my hands were clenched in my lap. His touch brought me back, anchored me before I drifted too far. I could feel my heartbeat throbbing behind my eyes, my skin burning. And then came the whispers, low but intentional. Lydia let out a soft snort. "I told you," she murmured to Justin. Uncle Oliver shook his head as if it was all so predictable. "Takes a certain kind of person to walk away from their own father," he said, louder than he needed to. The others, the cousins, the so-called family friends, didn't say much, but their silence was just as loud. I stared at the grain of the wood on the table, the lines twisting and spiraling, almost hypnotic. It was easier to look at that than at their faces. I could hear my own voice inside my head, flat and empty. Why did I come? Why did I think he would remember me? But then Thomas moved. He let go of my hand and straightened up. I felt the shift before I saw it. His voice cut through the tension like a small blade, soft but unwavering. You forgot about the video he recorded. The room froze. Lydia blinked. Oliver turned. Mr. Carlos stopped, his pen still hovering over the page. I turned to Thomas, confusion flooding my brain. What video? I asked, barely above a whisper. But Thomas wasn't looking at me. He was looking ahead, steady, certain. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small white envelope, slightly crumpled but still sealed. My name was on the front, but underneath was my father's handwriting. For the lawyer, only if things get ugly. I still didn't understand, but Thomas did, and suddenly, for the first time that day, I felt the balance in the room shift. I stared at the envelope in my son Thomas's hands as if it were radioactive. He held it so calmly, as if it wasn't the most dangerous object in the room. But my eyes were fixed on the handwriting on the front, clear, in capital letters, unmistakable, my father's. For the lawyer, only if things get ugly. Well, things had gotten ugly. I could barely find my voice. Thomas, where did you get this? He looked at me, his expression gentle but firm. Grandpa gave it to me a while ago, he said. He told me to keep it safe. My heart faltered. He gave you this? He nodded. The day we visited, just him and me. You were at work. I blinked hard, trying to bring the memory into focus. I remembered that day. Thomas had asked if he could go with our neighbor to drop something off at my father's house. It was the first time I had let him go without me. I had no idea they even spoke now. Mr. Carlos reached across the table. May I? He asked gently, and Thomas handed over the envelope without hesitation. The entire room leaned forward. Lydia was squinting, as if she couldn't comprehend. Oliver shifted in his chair, for the first time not slouching. For once, no one had anything to say. The envelope made a soft tearing sound as Carlos opened it. Inside was a USB drive, small, black, ordinary, but my pulse quickened as if it were a grenade. Carlos frowned and took out a note from the envelope as well, another page in my father's handwriting. His eyes scanned the paper, and for the first time since he had entered the room, his composure broke, just a little, but I saw it. He didn't speak immediately, just nodded slowly, as if something unsaid had been confirmed. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Carlos said, his voice lower now, there is a video message from Marcus Honor, recorded before the final version of this will. It was sealed with instructions to be played only if this situation became contentious. His eyes flickered over Lydia and then Oliver. Both shifted in their seats. Lydia scoffed. This is ridiculous. He didn't say anything about a video. Uncle Oliver leaned forward, his voice harsher now. We don't even know what's on that thing. It could be fake. Carlos held up a hand. It has a time and date stamp. I recognize the handwriting and the signature, and according to his instructions, I am legally obligated to play it. He connected the USB drive to a sleek black laptop on the table beside him. The screen flickered, the logo dissolving into a black screen with a single word. Play? The air in the room changed. No one spoke, no one moved. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. I gripped the arms of my chair as if they could stop me from floating away into some other world. My breath was shallow, shaky. Why would my father leave a video? Why Thomas? What could he possibly want to say now, after everything? Thomas didn't look nervous, just sat still, his eyes on the screen as if he already knew what was coming. Lydia looked pale now, her lips pressed into a tight line. Oliver stopped chewing his cigar. I wanted to run, wanted to cry, wanted to scream, but mostly I just wanted to know. Carlos pressed the spacebar. The screen went black for a half second, then flickered, and suddenly, there he was, my father. Older, thinner, sitting at his desk, wearing that navy blue sweater I had bought him for his last birthday, the one I didn't know he had ever worn. His hands were folded, his expression not cold, just tired. He looked directly at the camera and then he began to speak. I didn't breathe, not when the screen lit up, Not when I saw his face. Not when I heard the first two words leave his mouth. "Hi, Chris?" He looked older than I remembered. His skin had thinned, his once proud posture had softened, but it was still my father, Marcus Honor, sitting at that worn oak desk with the antique globe behind him, just like when we were kids. Except this time his expression wasn't stern or distant. It was human. "If you're watching this," he continued, "then I'm gone, and I'm guessing things didn't go smoothly at the reading." His hands were clasped in front of him, his fingers twitching slightly, a small nervous habit I had too. "I didn't expect peace between you and the family. I know what they think of you. Hell, I know what I said about you." He looked down, swallowed, and then I was wrong. My breath caught in my throat, my fingernails digging into the armrest. Thomas glanced at me, but I couldn't look away. I believed what Lydia told me. I believed Oliver. I believed you left because you didn't care. I didn't ask questions, I didn't listen to you, not once. You tried, and I slammed the door in your face on you and Thomas. I heard Lydia shift in her chair, stiff and uncomfortable. I didn't look at her, couldn't. My father's voice cracked slightly. "I thought being strong meant being proud, that if you left, it was betrayal. But strength is showing up, it's protecting your child, and you did that. You did what I couldn't." His eyes glistened, my own vision blurred. "I met Thomas one day when he showed up, just the two of us. That boy, he didn't say much, but when I asked him about you, he just said, 'My mom is the safest place in the world.'" My hand flew to my mouth. "I missed you, Chris. I see that now. I lost my daughter because I couldn't stop being right long enough to love you the way you needed. But I'm not going to let my last act be pushing you away again." He cleared his throat and looked directly into the camera, steady. "So I changed the will." There was a collective gasp in the room. Someone's chair scraped back, maybe Oliver. Lydia muttered something inaudible. I could barely hear anything over the sound of my father's voice. "I've left the house to you and Thomas, the savings, the retirement fund. It's yours, and a college fund for Thomas. I know it doesn't fix what I broke, but I want you to have the peace I couldn't give you when I was alive." He paused, then leaned slightly closer to the camera. "And if they're angry, let them be angry. You deserved this. You went through all of it and you never stopped being a mother. That's more than I ever managed." A lump formed in my throat, so big I could barely breathe. "I'm proud of you, and I love you, Chris. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it." And then, just before the video faded to black, he added softly, "Take care of my grandson. Tell him thank you." The screen went dark. No music, no transition, just silence, pure, still, holy silence around me. Chairs creaked, someone sniffled, but I didn't move. I stayed there, my hand over my mouth, tears streaming down my face, feeling like something I hadn't even known I was carrying had finally been lifted after all the years of noise, of guilt, of exile, of silence. He had heard me. He had finally heard me. And in the silence that followed, no one could take that away from me. No one spoke when the screen went black. Not Lydia, not Oliver, not the cousins or the family friends who had once smiled politely while ignoring the weight I carried. Even Mr. Carlos sat motionless, his hand frozen above the mouse, as if stopping the video had stopped time itself. And maybe, in a way, it had. I don't know how long I sat there. My hand was still over my mouth, my cheeks wet, but I hadn't registered the tears falling until I felt Thomas's hand slip into mine again. He wasn't crying, just looked at me with that small, knowing smile, as if he had been waiting all along for the truth to finally find a voice. I leaned down and kissed the top of his head. My heart ached with something too big for words. Love, relief, grief, all agreeing together. Across the room, Lydia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She grabbed her purse with trembling hands and left without a word. Her husband followed, red-faced with anger, muttering something inaudible. Oliver remained seated for a long time, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on nothing. When he finally rose, he looked at Carlos as if he wanted to argue, but even he knew there was nothing left to fight. My father had spoken his truth, and now it was impossible to ignore. The others followed one by one. Some couldn't meet my eyes, some offered silent nods, of pity or maybe respect. I couldn't tell. Soon, it was just the three of us left. Carlos, Thomas, and me. Carlos gently closed his briefcase and cleared his throat. "There will be some paperwork," he said, his voice softer than before, "but everything is in order." I nodded. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? He gave a small, genuine smile and left us alone in the room. The silence that followed wasn't the same kind I had grown used to. This silence was peaceful, complete, as if something had finally clicked into place. I looked at Thomas, still holding my hand, still looking at me as if I were the strongest person in the world. And maybe, in his eyes, I was. But it was he who had saved me, who had carried that envelope as if it were just a piece of paper, not the truth that would rewrite everything. We stayed a little longer. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed time to breathe. Maybe I wanted to sit in the one room where, for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. I kept hearing my father's voice in my head, "I'm proud of you." 3 words I thought I would never hear, words I needed more than I ever admitted. I thought of everything I had carried, years of silence, of being blamed, of being erased. And now I wasn't erased. I was seen, heard, remembered. I looked at Thomas again. "Thank you," I whispered. He tilted his head. "For what?" "For being braver than me," I said. "For holding on to something that mattered." He smiled. "I just wanted you to hear him." And I had heard him, not just in the video, but in the shift that came after, in the peace that filled the room after everyone else had gone. That's the truth. It doesn't always come when you want it to, but when it does, it changes everything. So no, I didn't leave that room broken. I left holding my son's hand, with my father's words still echoing in my chest. I left whole. And that silence finally meant something. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been cast aside, misjudged, or made to feel like your voice didn't matter, know this: you are not invisible. What did you think of Chris's story? Tell us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your opinion. If you enjoyed this story, please like and share this video, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.